Oh, hey.
Hi.
Hi. How's it going, guys? So I'm Becca.
I'm Red.
And we're from Abernathy. Thank you guys to the Downtown Davenport Partnership for making all of this fabulousness happen.
Yeah.
It's extra fancy here.
There's lights. There's a boom mic thing.
Now there's action. So we wanted to, when they came to us with this idea, we want to share our expertise.
Yeah.
Or Abernathy's expertise.
Yeah. And something that we specialize here at Abernathy's is vintage clothing. And there's a lot of questions about vintage clothing.
Yeah. So one of the most popular questions that we get is like, what size am I? What size is this? Like, because vintage sizing is worldly different than what we have now. And even like from store to store, you're going to experience the sizes are different. Mm-hmm. So we want to show you how to measure yourself, and then how to measure a vintage garment, and how to identify what is a vintage garment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's fun.
Yes. Red is going to be my lovely model, my lovely assistant. Oh, I think maybe we'll scoot over this. Let's do a little bit. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure Red, and we're going to basically show you how to measure yourself at home. So for those of you who may have one of these at home, it's just a fabric tape measure. You can get it at Walmart. You can get it at Joann's. Mm-hmm. But I'll show you a nifty trick if you don't have one at home. So we're going to need 3 measurements to properly fit Red for an awesome vintage dress from Abernathy's. We're going to need her bust measurement. We're going to need her waist measurement. And we're going to need her hip measurement. And no, I'm not going to tell you what her measurements are.
They're great.
All right. So first one being bust. So bust is going to be across the chest. I'm going to come in real close. All right, Red can go ahead and lower her arms. So when you measure your bust, you want to basically go armpit to armpit, right under the arms. And you want to keep the tape measure kind of straight across. Make sure it's not too low in the back or too high in the front. And we're going to measure across the fullest part of the bust. And you want to put that tape measure together and just get yourself a solid number. If you're doing this at home and you're writing them down, write down a couple of numbers. If you feel like you might be kind of in between, give yourself a little like variance. Next we're going to do is we're going to measure her waist. So actually you want to show them how you can find your waist.
So if you put your hands kind of where you think your hips are going to be, and then you bend over right in that crease is where your actual natural waistline is. Now, I know that a lot of people think that the waistline is just where you wear your pants, but that is not correct for vintage clothing measurements. So yep, right here, and then bend and bend. So they should be either here. And most times it's going to be about where your belly button is.
Yeah, or a little bit
on
above.
it or above.
Yeah. So yeah, identifying that natural waist is important because a lot of these clothes have a natural waistline. So if you do that bend one more time, kind of show me where your waist is, and then I'm going to come in and measure there. All right, so go ahead and move your hands. All right, and again, you're just going to take the tape measure, write down a couple of numbers for yourself. That way you have a good variant. All right, and then the last one is going to be hip. So hip is going to be starting right above the hip bone, and you want to pretty much encompass the largest part of the booty. So we're going to come in, and we're going to get right on the largest part. And then it's easiest when you're measuring yourself for your hip measurement. Start on one. You can see on the other measurements I did in the front, but you want to start on one hip and then come around. So we'll just go ahead and measure there.
So often I have measured just like in front of me, trying to see it.
Not easy to see.
No.
So once you have your measurements, what I find these useful for is online shopping. Mm-hmm. If you're shopping here in the store, you're at a thrift store, you're at a yard sale where things aren't generically sized.
Yeah.
So it's once you have your measurements written down, you can maybe like put it on a business card and put it in your wallet so it's always with you, or text it to your friend and be like,
take a picture of it.
Yeah, that way it's in your phone all the time. Easy peasy.
Yes.
So that is how you measure yourself.
So now I'm going to show you how to actually measure a vintage garment that's here in the store at Abernathy's. So the first one you want to do is going to be your bust. So to measure something that's vintage, you want to go from armpit to armpit. I can move this over a little bit. So let's get our tape measure ready. So you want to find the armpit. This one's a little bit more difficult because it has some ruffles, but you just want to pull it kind of taut, not too crazy, because you don't want it to be too tight. And you go from side to side. So that is going to be about 36. Then the waist is going to be the smallest part of the dress. This one's kind of nice because it has that belted look, so it's easy to find the waist. Right in the middle there, and it's going to be 28. And then the hip. So today I learned from Becca actually about from the belly button down 9 inches, right?
From the waistline.
Okay.
So like if we were measuring a garment that didn't have like a defined waist,
Yeah.
I just measured 9 inches from the waistline, which like a lot of time there'll be a seam there. And so you can measure 9 inches below the waist or the widest part of the bottom of the skirt.
And this one does a pretty good job. This one actually has a little bit more wider spot. So you just take your tape measure, widest spot, kind of pull it a little bit, and it's going to be, let's see, about 42.
Yeah. So that way you can compare your measurements to yourself and to your dress, and you can tell pretty easily without having to try something on. Like, is this going to fit me? Is it worth me getting into the fitting room and trying it on?
That's often the biggest question.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Before I forget, I was going to mention about if you don't have a fabric tape measure at home.
Yep.
So I brought a couple tools. If you guys don't have a fabric tape measure to measure yourself, one thing you can do is just a piece of string, take around and measure yourself, mark it, and then once you have that, you can use your regular like handy dandy steal your garage tape measure to measure your bust and waist. I have a lot of people when they look at our website, they say, I don't have a fabric tape measure. I'm like, if you got these two things,
don't need it.
Yeah, you can make it happen. So the other thing we were going to talk about is like, what is vintage technically? Yeah.
We have one measurement question.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I don't know if you're gonna know this, but how does one measure for a hat?
Oh, okay.
That one is around the middle of the widest part of your head.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes. It's around like the circumference of your head, I believe. I have actually, so we've had a few vintage hats in the store, and I find that not always when I measure something, does it translate to like, so inside it'll say, you know what? Well, it'll say like 6 3/4 or 6.5.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's wide enough to go around. It might be.
Oh,
Which is like, how do you measure that?
I don't know. Find somebody who makes hats.
Yeah.
A
Oh, that
millinery.
could be.
Is that it? Is that closer to that number?
Well, that would be like 12.
My head's huge.
I doubt you have that big of a head. So you know what?
We don't know.
We don't know that one,
but we're gonna Google it.
We can
later.
Google it. Yes.
Get back to Tony.
Yeah. He's around here.
You know
somewhere
what?
Asking.
Try it on.
That's also a good way.
Hats aren't as complicated as clothes.
That's true. There's not as much unzipping there. Okay, so what is vintage?
Mhm.
So there's a few technical terms, but like generally we define vintage as something that's over 20 years old.
Mhm.
Please don't be offended if you are now officially labeled vintage.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's
in.
rad. Everybody's doing it.
Getting older.
So we kind of, in the store, we specialize in 1930s, 1940s, 50s, and up to like the mid 60s. There was kind of a really specific era change there where things went from more like housewife to disco queen.
We're down with the disco queen.
We're done with the disco queen, but we kind of lean a little bit towards the older stuff. So we got vintage, and then we also have retro.
So retro is going to be more of like a reproduction of something that's vintage. We actually carry at least two different lines that do reproductions of vintage prints or vintage patterns, and that's Collective and Hell Bunny, both from the UK. I have two examples. So fancy. So this would be Collective, and this is Hell Bunny.
It's great because, so obviously with vintage stuff, you fall in love with something and you measure it, you're gonna find out if it fits you. But with this stuff, we carry it extra, extra small through 4X. And some of our companies are even expanding into 5 and 6X.
Yes.
Really exciting.
And the best part ever is that most of these dresses have pockets, which most vintage items do not.
Mine doesn't today, but that's okay. All right. So just a few key things. We're out, we're estate sale hunting, we're yard sale shopping. Like, how do I identify if something's vintage? So to start, I pulled an example of something that's not vintage. So how I'm able to tell, just kind of off the top of my head, is this piece, it says right here, it's made in Indonesia, or anything that's made in China is going to be not vintage. So if you see markings like that, you're going to know we're going to pass on that piece. We'll go on to the next. With the exception of if you're looking for countries that don't exist anymore, or territories that don't exist anymore. Like, this is a kind of an exception. This one is made in British Hong Kong. So we know they got their independence. And so This is old.
What was it?
It was 1999. I was like, that wasn't that long
wasn't
ago.
Seems weird.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through this one. So this one, as you can see, this one doesn't have a size. So that's going to happen a lot with the vintage clothing, which is why this whole tutorial is important to learn. And then this one.
So that one, so anything that doesn't have a size means it's usually 1958. After 1958, they implemented different, like everybody had to have sizes. So this one does have a size, but if you notice on here, and this is really small and the tag's kind of faded, but it says lot. So lot means a lot. It means that it's definitely vintage. So yeah, it's teeny tiny, but it's just going to say right above the size, it's going to say lot. And that's just a good, easy identifier that it is vintage.
So this one is going to be a union tag. These ones are actually pretty cool. This one was 1920s to 1980s. And sometimes they will be on the inseams or in pockets, suit pockets especially, or located on the back of the neck.
All right. One of my easiest ways that actually Red and I we were literally yesterday on top of a heap of vintage clothing.
Yeah.
A mound of it. It was beautiful.
Huge.
But there were several pieces that tripped both of us up. Like they had like really beautiful 30s style embroidery, but an easy way for us to identify if it's vintage or not is if it has a metal zipper.
Yeah.
So like this is an example of a metal zipper. It's just like the zipper track itself is made of metal. Post like 1963, those were pretty commonly replaced with plastic. So if you can kind of feel the texture on the zipper, is it metal? Is it plastic? Metal's gonna mean it's vintage. It's good to go.
And lastly, we have a handmade piece. So this is going to be something that doesn't have any tags. It often has raw edges on the inside. It generally kind of looks more handmade. And that's a good sign that it was pre-1980.
Making your own clothes was much more common, like 50s through the 70s or so. So if something's handmade, chances are it's vintage.
Yeah.
And these aren't like, absolute rules for vintage, but they're just easy ways. If you're out shopping and you want to find something yourself, then this is kind of how you can start sourcing it on your own.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel like doing that, you can come here to Abernathy.
And we'll help you.
Yes, we will help you. We offer measurements. Yep. We can write them down for you. We can help pull things that are your size or your specific eras that you like. So, but yeah. So yeah, I hope that I'm ready to do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I want to see what other businesses in downtown Davenport have to say, what they are experts in, but hopefully maybe they'll let us come back.
Maybe.
You can come back.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys later.